Hi everyone, this is Katie with Empowering Astrology, and we are doing a midweek check-in on the astrology of September 23rd to September 30th, 2019. We're getting a bit of a late start this week because I've been traveling. I've been in California. I've been kind of making my way from San Diego to Palm Springs to Ojai, back through Los Angeles because a very good friend of mine was getting married. I was also seeing some other friends. So that's where I was. And I wanted to use this time today to check in about maybe some of the astrology that was happening last week. I wrote about this in my update about Jupiter square Neptune and this idea of the erosion of faith and confidence. So, check in with me if you're watching live. Say hello. I see. Hi, Karen. Thank you for saying hello. How are you doing? And I opened up in my update last week that, as somebody who is very Jupiterian myself, I'm what's called Sag rising. So Jupiter square Neptune for me was this very, almost like I had to come back into myself. I needed to meditate more. I needed to kind of search for the answers deep within myself. And I did share a little bit in my update last week on Facebook and also on my website. And we had some really great comments on the Facebook post about how this attachment to suffering, and it felt very much woven into the experience of Jupiter square Neptune. And what do I mean by attachment to suffering? And I think this is something that we all do in astrology. I certainly see it in my client work. We have an attachment to a certain thing happening, and we look to astrology to tell us when that's going to happen. And astrology can certainly point to when sometimes sometimes certain things are more likely to happen, but sometimes we have this suffering when it doesn't happen. And I personally reached this point last week where I was like, what if I would let go of an attachment to certain things happening? And that felt very freeing. And I know that that's a very kind of Buddhist concept, and we talked about on my Facebook post about this idea of what the Buddha says, and I'm not a Buddhist, but it's certainly something that resonates with me. So I just wanted to share some of my thoughts and kind of create some continuity as to what we were discussing last week and some of the Facebook comments. I think we need to have our faith tests. And I know that the word faith can have a religious context, and I kind of want to separate the word faith from some of that religious context in the sense that faith can describe our faith in ourselves, our faith in the future, our faith in certain things happening, our faith in the system. This idea of our confidence in ourselves and our ability. And I think sometimes we need to have that faith tested, because if we don't, it becomes a bit weak, is a way to put it. So we need to understand what we believe in, but we wouldn't understand what we believed in unless we had to question it. So I really think that was part of the astrology this past week. And so I know that a couple of you, and maybe even quite a few of you, were feeling a bit low. So hopefully you're feeling better this week. And so hi, Leslie, nice to see you as well. Do say hi if you're watching live. How are you feeling? Jupiterian. Jupiter's been in Sagittarius since last November, and it's not going to be in Sagittarius for much longer. It will go into Capricorn in December. So Jupiter is very strong in Sagittarius, and normally it's a very optimistic placement for Jupiter to be in. It's a time to travel, to explore. If you are a Sagittarius, or if you are Sagittarius rising like me, exploration, search, truth, meaning, philosophy, they're very important things to you. I mean, for me, I can't stop traveling. It's maybe a little bit of a sickness, a good sickness. So like I was just saying at the beginning of the live video that I was I was just got back from California, so I'm a little bit jet lagged. Hi, Christina. Hi, Rochelle. So what about this week? I know that we're having this conversation on Wednesday. We are coming to what's called the dark of the moon. So we're in the last few days before a new moon. So this past lunar month began on August 30th. So here we are at the end of September, and we're coming to the end of a lunar month. So these last few days before the new moon, it's a time for reflection. It's a time for searching within, getting quiet and reflecting on everything that we have done or chosen. Let's say the projects that we started during Virgo season. It's time to wrap up. So do keep in mind that this week is in general a little bit more of a quieter week, more internal, more reflective. Even though Jupiter made its last square to Neptune last week, this energy does carry over. So, it's, yes, things are more, let's say, stronger in the run up to the exact aspect, but it's still kind of lingering there in the background. I think that that's something that as we get into the dark of the moon, maybe we do want to reflect on these deeper questions of faith, truth, and meaning that we were, let's say, chewing on last week. Hi, Belgian. Hi, another Christina. So this week, there's a couple of things that are going on before the new moon on Saturday, September 28th. That is something that I talked about in today's update, which is Venus square Saturn. And in fact, last week, I did a webinar on Saturn called Facing Saturn, Learn to Master Your Life. And it was actually, we got a really great feedback from that webinar, and I think it went really well. And I have said this before, and I know that I may be in the minority here, but I really like Saturn. I don't like Saturn. I don't think anybody truly likes Saturn, but I like Saturn because I understand Saturn, and I understand what Saturn is trying to do for each and every one of us. It's a planet that wants integrity, it wants commitment, it wants balance, and it wants harmony. Saturn, and this is a little bit of a technical point, Saturn is exalted in Libra. So Saturn does its best work in Libra. So that gives us a little bit of understanding of Saturn's deeper work. It wants balance, it wants fairness, it wants equity. So as Venus comes to the square to Saturn this week, this is a time for our relationships, Venus, Libra, to be tested, Saturn. This does not need to necessarily be romantic relationships because Libra is a sign of socialization. It's a sign that teaches us about how to compromise and how to interact with one another. Each sign of the zodiac teaches us about how to experience life, how to evolve through life, and how to learn through life. And that's what Libra's role is. So it's a sign of socialization. So this is a time when we want to look at all of our relationships, not just our romantic ones. And how are they holding up? How do we show up in relationships? And maybe we show up just fine. So Saturn is, saying, great, good job. Maybe it's time to recommit to a partnership or a connection, have let's say a conversation with a partner or a connection. Mercury is also in Libra right now. It's still kind of in a, let's say, wide square to Saturn. How do you reaffirm positive boundaries? That's another Saturn kind of word, is boundaries. What are we doing? What is kind of the limits of our relationship, the limits of our connection? Has somebody, let's say, gone over the boundaries? Saturn is a planet that likes to say no, and it's a healthy no. So it's a good week to look at our relationships. If you are in a romantic relationship, just how do you take a little bit of a critical eye to what you're doing, what you're engaging in, and how there can be more equity. And something that I've been thinking about is how, sometimes we have to say no to things in order to create space for what we really want. So I think Saturn also wants us to be aware of where we are, maybe, let's say, making connections with people that aren't up to snuff, up to par, whatever sort of word you want to use to describe it. I see your comment, Karen. It sounds like you have Saturn an aspect to your moon. And that's not an easy, let's say, placement to have astrologically. And this really does tap into a deeper philosophy that I have about astrology, is that your chart is just energy. We call it Saturn, we call it Venus, we call it Libra, we call it whatever. But these are just words in English or whatever language you speak, whatever the equivalent is, that describes an energy. So the thing that astrology doesn't describe is consciousness. It doesn't describe how you grow and you show up and you work with these different planetary energies in your chart. So you might have been born with some tough energy in your chart. And to shout out to those people that have tough energy in your chart. Usually it's the people with tough energy that do the most. They are the most successful, the most ambitious, the most holding themselves up to a higher standard. They work harder. So I think that maybe this myth that having a bad chart is bad, it's time for that myth to go, because every month, every year, you return to all of these different points in your chart, because astrology is a circle, it's a wheel, and you get another chance to show up differently and make new choices and to learn and to grow and mature through your chart. And maturity is also a Saturn word, which I think that that's something that we all need to do. We need to grow. We need to mature through our astrology. So this week with Venus square Saturn, we're maturing through our relationships. Now, this is an aspect that's pretty quick. So, maybe we'll feel this for a couple of days. I will add that Venus is also squaring the lunar nodes, because Saturn right now is on what's called the south node of the moon. So when a planet squares the lunar nodes, or is in conjunction, or or the conjunction to the north node or conjunction to the south node, you get a little bit of a ripple of eclipse energy. So maybe some relationships are seeing some turning points this week, for good or for maybe some necessary changes. To that point, somebody asked me about, I think it was you, Nikki, today, about eclipse energy, because we are going, we're just a few days out from October, and October is really going to activate the July eclipses. And I would even go so far as to say is that it's not just the July eclipses, it's also the eclipses of January 2019 and then even July of 2018, because they are all part of a series of eclipses in Cancer and Capricorn. So Libra is what's called square to Cancer and Capricorn. And when Mars gets into Libra, I think it's the 4th of October. So going into, let's say, that 2nd, 3rd, 4th week of October, Mars is going to start to activate eclipse degrees. So in astrology, when there's certain planets are triggers. Mars is a trigger, Saturn's a trigger, Jupiter, the moon, especially new and full moons. And when we have these triggers, we can see a little bit of a connection to what was going on with those eclipses. So there's a certain story that's unfolding in your life based on where Cancer and Capricorn are in your chart. So sometimes we go through eclipse season and nothing happens, and then a planet will trigger an eclipse degree, and then we see what the eclipses are unfolding in our life. And I'm not saying that to make any of you nervous, but just for us to be aware of what's going on, because eclipses talk about the unfolding of a story, this kind of great weaving of time, and it's these different threads that go back and forth, both to the future and both to the past. And sometimes you will see an event happen and it lines up with the eclipses that are maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 months in the future, which always kind of freaks me out, because it's like the future is now, what's going on, time is a flat circle, nothing makes sense anymore. Anyway, so I think going into this week, I think with eclipse energy, we might see things turning a corner. We might see doors opening, doors closing. I think there are some things going on in the world right now that seem a bit charged that might speak to eclipse energy. And maybe you're seeing certain things in your life that speak to the eclipse energy. Rochelle, you asked, can the energy be better than it was in July with eclipses? I don't have control over that. I think I want to reaffirm what is the bigger story with these eclipses, because here's a couple of things. One, the North Node is in Cancer right now. It'll be in Cancer until next, don't quote me on this, March, April, May, June. Don't have my ephemeris handy. But with the North Node in Cancer, we all have to, all collectively, all 8 billion people on this planet need to move towards Cancer, which is to say heart, emotional connection, finding our roots, doing what we love. I've seen a lot of people kind of move away from what we're supposed to do, Capricorn, the duty and responsibility, and sometimes the crippling imprisonment of Capricorn, towards something that's more heart-focused, Cancer. I have nothing against Capricorn. It's a lovely sign. But right now, the South Node of the Moon's in Capricorn. So we all have to look at what our past narrative is with Capricorn. The South Node is the past. It's karma, it's instinct, it's where there's a little bit of a, let's say, a groove, a well-worn groove. And what I've noticed with the South Node in Capricorn is that sometimes we limit ourselves. We get stuck in these prisons of, oh, I can't do that because ... Maybe your family or your mother or whatever you told you can't do that. I'm supposed to do this. Capricorn and its negative facet is also fears and limitations. So maybe we're having to look at what our fears are if we were to move towards something that we actually truly love, Cancer. So these eclipses, the ones in July, the ones that are upcoming in December and then also January 2020 are going to be another chance to revisit that story. So we also got Saturn's on the South Node right now. We've got Pluto also in Capricorn, and this is why when I was talking about this, the eclipses this past July, I was talking about the wrecking ball. Whatever walls, whatever personal prisons, whatever ways we limit ourselves through fear, how do we break down those walls? Because when you throw Pluto into the element, we are doing a lot of deep shadow work, and we're having to, let's say, draw a line in 2019 and maybe even 2020 as well between the past and the present and where we're going. Because Pluto talks about the things that we cannot bring with us. And I know that that's a little bit of a harsh statement. I mean, tough love. I don't know. I'm a Scorpio, so I'm just like, sometimes it has to die. But of course, I mean that with love. Hi, Joanna. I know, Nikki, the eclipses in July 2018 and July 2019 were difficult. They had a lot of Pluto energy. And like I said, when Pluto is involved, we're having to do a lot of deep soul excavation, and that's not easy work. Transformation work it's not easy. So I think that because we're going into a time when there's a little bit of a blip around the eclipse energy, and because the sun is in Libra right now, this part of this work has to do with relationships. That's just the nature of Libra. And also because Venus is in Libra. Venus doesn't get to Scorpio until October 8th. I will also add, so, speaking of Libra, we have a Libra new moon on Saturday, September 28th. For those who, it'll be at 2:28 p.m. in New York. It'll be 11:28 a.m. in Los Angeles, 7:28 p.m. in London, 4:28 a.m. in Sydney on September 29th, and 6:28 a.m. in Auckland and New Zealand. I actually wrote down the time zones this time. So yes, Saturday or Sunday if you're in Australia and New Zealand, we're going to have a new moon. And this new moon does activate some eclipse energy, but it also says that going forward into the next 4 weeks, the lunar month, it is a time for new beginnings in relationships. So new moons equal new beginnings, new chapters. And it won't necessarily be, quote unquote, relationships for everybody, but that is the general theme for a Libra new moon, whether it's relationships, whether it's how we're connecting with people, how we're socializing, compromising, negotiating, how are we creating harmony and balance in our lives. So this new moon, Venus will be making what's called a square to Pluto. So this is where over the coming 4 weeks of this lunar month, we're doing some Pluto work. We're looking at maybe the darker side of relationships, the shadow side of relationships, issues of power and control, inequity, because Venus will go into Scorpio, let's say, I don't know, is that like a week and change, or like less than a week after the new moon? So with Venus and Scorpio, for most of the lunar month, like we've got to look at themes around intimacy, how we are feeling vulnerable with a relationship. How are we dealing with the things that we don't talk about in polite company in a relationship? So Venus in Scorpio, Venus is traditionally not at home in Scorpio, but it's a sign that teaches us about how to find value and even love and even partnership on a level that is very, very deep. It's very psychologically driven. It's very soulful. That's in the positive facet of Venus and Scorpio. We love with all of our heart. There's no middle ground. It's all the way. Now the shadow side of Venus and Scorpio, and I would say even Venus square Pluto with the new moon, is we have to look at what our obsessions are. We have to look at where we undo ourselves or where we self-sabotage in relationships. And we have to look at even how maybe we attract relationships into our life that are not good for us. So we're doing some deep work with this Libra new moon that's coming up on September 28th and also the 29th if you're in Australia or New Zealand. Thanks for your feedback, Bonnie. So I'll quickly, while we have the time, go around the zodiac so that you know where the Libra new moon is activating. So if you're an Aries, or an Aries rising, this Libra new moon is all about relationship because Libra is your relationship sign. So just everything that I was talking about, Aries, it's a natural time for you in your zodiac calendar to focus on new beginnings in relationships. So if you're not in relationship and you do want relationship, it might be a time when doors are naturally opening or you're being led in that direction, but do keep in mind that Aries, you have to look at the shadow side of relationships. So anything around manipulation, power, control, intimacy, sexuality, that might be woven into your experiences this coming lunar month, Aries. I will add that if you are in a relationship, that might mean that it's time for a new chapter in relationship or a time when you and a partner are doing some deeper work around intimacy. Going into Taurus, Libra is what's called your health and wellness sign. So this lunar month is a time to set some really positive goals around taking care of yourself and also looking at how you, because Venus is your planet, maybe self-sabotage. I've noticed that with Libra as Taurus's health and wellness sign, you guys do have a little bit of a sweet tooth. So there might be some looking at health, food, diet, how you're taking care of yourself, maybe again, how you're self-sabotaging. It is also a time when work and projects are a big focus over the coming lunar month. Going Gemini, Libra is your sign of creativity and self-expression and identity. So it's a lunar month for you to kind of get into what makes you you. So, you know, Gemini, if you kind of flaunt your personality is the best way I can put it. You know, it's a time when creativity, or what do you put your stamp on? What do you put your name on? This is what's called a 5th house new moon for you. So, you know, don't hold back and don't be shy in this coming lunar month, Gemini. For Cancer, this is a lunar month that's very much focused on home and family. So, you know, with this new moon, you might be thinking about a move. You may be moving. You may, especially with Mars going into Libra, starting on the 4th of October. I've just noticed when Mars goes to this part of the chart for certain signs, there may be a move. Or you're just thinking about putting down roots, laying down a foundation, putting some effort into the home. There might even be some bigger family issues that are coming up. Maybe with that Venus square Pluto, you have to look at some, let's say, shadow family stuff, you know, stuff from the past, stuff about ancestors, stuff that maybe normally doesn't get talked about by family members. So it could be a, let's say, a revelation for you, Cancer. Moving to Leo, this Libra new moon is in your sign of communication, education, and travel. So it very well may be a busy lunar month for you. You may be traveling a lot, especially once Mars gets to Libra. You might be going on road trips. You might be planning trips in general. You might even be planning a trip to some sort of faraway destination, especially around the full moon on the 13th of October. You also might be focusing on education. So it's a time to take in new information. It's a time to take classes and learn. Or, you know, you might even be focusing on higher education, university, or getting, let's say, the information that you need that's going to help. You know, it's a little bit more focused for your career and your ambitions. Moving on to, I said Leo, Virgo. This new moon has to do with money. So you're entering a lunar month that's focused on creating material stability and security in your life. So you've just had a birthday, happy belated birthday, Virgo, and now it's time to, let's say, get to kind of basics. What do you need? Food, resource, shelter. How do you feel that your life can be stable and secure? So it's a time to, let's say, buy the things that you need to buy, or focus on your bank account, or making more money, or just getting stuff. It's very much a material month, especially once Mars gets there as well. With the new moon coming up in October, you may have to look at spending and this idea of assets, debt, wealth, these things that looking at your bank statements and all that jazz. Moving on to Libra. Happy birthday, Libra. So this new moon gives you a personal refresh, a personal restart. And the new moon on Saturday is a time for you to, let's say, make some intentions for this coming personal year. What do you want? What do you want to create? With Mars going into Libra on the 4th of October, it might be a time when you feel very animated, like you want to, let's say, move forward, take action. When Mars is in your sign, Libra, you're not, let's say, playing nice anymore. Like sometimes Libra, it can play the, let's say, it can play the game. You know, it's really good with negotiation. But with Mars and Libra in the coming weeks, I think that you're going to be going more after what you want. So with that in mind, like, what do you want for your coming, you know, birthday, you know, this kind of new year for you? It is a time for new beginnings, and especially with the full moon on the 13th of October, the spotlight is on relationships. So you may be doing a lot of kind of, let's say, back and forth negotiation with a partner, whether it's romantic or not romantic. Libra do the shadow work this lunar month, you know, because Venus will be making what's called a square to Pluto. So how do you kind of look at the hidden side of your desires, the hidden side of you, what you want, and how can you transform in this coming personal year for yourself? Scorpio. So you are coming to the end of your personal calendar. Libra makes what's called your 12th sign, your 12th house. So this is a time of endings for you, especially once Mars gets into Libra on the 4th of October. Now, endings, don't be afraid of that word. Everything kind of has its own natural cycle and rhythm. And as you get to the end of your personal calendar year, it's a time to reflect back on where you've been and what you've created and what you've achieved since your last birthday. You may be going into October, pulling back from the world, retreating more, reflecting, recharging your batteries. So every sign has a time when it needs to rest. It can't always be go, go, go all the time. So Scorpio, this coming lunar month is kind of your reminder that it's time to rest. It's time to prepare for the next, you know, personal year. And to that point, what do you not want to bring with you into this new personal year? Moving on to Sagittarius. Libra is your sign of friends and community. So this is a time when you're very focused on the people that you call your friends, the groups you're involved in, the community, your community in general. So you might be going into a time when you're having to look at maybe some shadow stuff with friends and groups, because Pluto is very much wrapped up into the story of this new moon. So it's also a time when you are coming, you know, starting to at least come to the end of your personal calendar. So what are your hopes and dreams for the future? It's a time to think big. It's a time to, let's say, you know, zoom out a little bit. So what do you see? Like, what's the big picture? You might be a little bit more interested in social causes, community issues, be involved in your community. So Capricorn, Libra is your career sign. So this is a natural time for you to, let's say, have a personal reset in your professional life. This could mean getting a new job. This could mean taking your current career, your current ambitions in a new direction. It's a time when you're at, let's say, the most public part of your personal calendar. So you might be more involved out in the world. People might be noticing you more. The spotlight might be on you more. With Mars going into Libra for most of October, do be prepared to work a lot going into October. So if you have ambitions, if there's things that you want to achieve and create in October, Capricorn, how are you going to work for it? You know, Mars is going to really sort of, let's say, light a fire in your career. But it might mean, because Pluto is involved, that you need to, let's say, make some changes, some transformation, and leave some of the past behind. Aquarius. So this new moon is in what's called your ninth sign, your ninth house. So this lunar month is all about travel. It's also about education. So you might be focusing on the what do I believe in, philosophy, going back to school, doing some study. I think the bigger picture part of this time for you, Aquarius, is like, what do you believe in? What's your truth? You might be thinking of these bigger themes of faith, but it is a natural time for travel to be very highlighted for you. So you might have a long distance trip in particular planned, whether it's many miles or many thousands of miles, or even a trip that's outside of the country that you live in. Moving on to final signs, Pisces. This new moon is in what's called your 8th sign, your 8th house. So it is a natural time for you over the coming 4 weeks to do a lot of personal soul searching, a lot of looking within your psyche. What is it that you're not facing, your personal fears, intimacy, feeling vulnerable. It's a little bit of an emotional month, especially with that Venus square Pluto. So you might be having to do a lot of deep digging. You're coming out of a time, Pisces, where it's been about relationships, and relationships naturally lead us to these deeper themes around intimacy, which does include, of course, sexuality. So you might be doing a lot of that kind of behind the scenes emotional work this month. So that's the kind of the in general what's going on with this Libra new moon on Saturday, September 28th or 29th if you are in Australia and New Zealand. I will say for my friends in Australia and New Zealand, I get this question all the time. There's a lot of confusion around what dates apply to them, because I know in many cases you are anywhere from 13, 14, 15, 16 hours ahead of New York City, where I'm located. So I just say, as a general rule, unless I'm very specifically giving the time for Australia and New Zealand, just if I'm writing for Monday, US, it's going to more than likely apply to Tuesday, Australia and New Zealand. That's just kind of the easiest way to kind of navigate this very large time difference. Yeah, Lindsay, congratulations. Looks like you're going to be giving birth on this new moon. Well, we shall see indeed. Let us know. I know that you probably have a lot of other things to do than watch me on Facebook Live, but congratulations with that. So that pretty much sums it all up. Point of housekeeping. Yeah, like if you are still interested in my Facing Saturn webinar, like I said, I got a lot of great feedback. I think we had a really great webinar. It's still available to purchase the replay. And then I'm doing another webinar on October 1st. And this is actually something that I've been wanting to do for a while, is having a webinar that's specifically on the astrology of that month, and then looking at it sign by sign. And in a way, it's an extension of my monthly horoscopes, but this gives you a chance to, let's say, get more information and also ask me questions. So whether you participate live in the webinar or if you watch the replay and ask me questions via email. So the upcoming webinar is Tuesday, October 1st at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. That is 4:30 p.m. Los Angeles. And then that's I don't have the time. I think that's 11:30 p.m. in London, and then 8:30 a.m. Sydney the next day, and something like that. So, like this thing I can't do time zones on the fly. But if you can't make it live, you can still register to watch the replay. So I'm calling it your October 2019 Astrology Planner. It's my latest webinar. I've been getting a lot of great feedback from my webinars. Been getting a lot of people coming back again and again and again, which I am very grateful. I think it's a wonderful way to learn astrology and to engage with each other about astrology. So I just checking out the chat. So yeah, please follow me on Instagram, Twitter, if you don't already. Of course, I am on Facebook. And hello to everybody that is watching live, including my mom. Hi, Mom. And also those that are watching the replay. So it's always a pleasure to have a chance to check in with you all. Let's say we're discussing the upcoming Libra New Moon, and we will do this again next week. So until then, thank you very much, and bye.